Right. I am going to do this whiskey, and then because of all these flies that are in the kitchen, I'm going to get some fly spray and I'm going to spray the shit out of this room because these little swines that are hanging around in the ceiling are really getting on my nerves. Right, so we carry on with, I think we're on 196 now, so we're nearly at the double century. Not bad. So this is another donation from Mr. X, and unlike the Blair Athol that I've just had, which was quite an old bottling, I think it was about a 30-year-old miniature. I know this is more recent, but still not that more recent, and we'll find out in a second. So Fettercairn, of which this is here between. It's north of Montrose, and it's basically between. I think it's the A90, which is between Dundee and Aberdeen, and it's about just off the A90, about halfway between those two cities. And the name of the town Fettercairn is loosely based on Gaelic for foot of the hill, and it's at the base of the Grampian Mountains. Now, the distillery itself is one of the older distilleries. It was founded in 1824 by a guy called Alexander Ramsay, who converted a mill on his quite large estate and converted it to a distillery. However, he wasn't particularly great with money, and by 1829 he'd lost his fortune, and he sold it to a gentleman called John Gladstone, whose son, he had two sons, one of which was Thomas, who was looking after the estate and the distillery, and they were letting it out. And one of the other sons was a gentleman called William Gladstone, who, if you know your British political history, ended up becoming British Prime Minister. I think he was elected 3 times in a row, and very, very well regarded. Gladstone and Benjamin Disraeli were kind of around that time. And the only reason I know that is when I was a kid, I used to go to a hotel in Cornwall who had 2 black Labradors, and they were called Gladstone and Disraeli. And for whatever reason, I must have been about 5 or 6 at the time. For whatever reason, those 2 names of those 2 dogs, knowing that they were politicians, has stuck with me for the next 30 years. Weird, isn't it? Anyway, I digress for a change. So Fettercairn went through a multitude of owners between Gladstone taking it over and then 1927 when it closed, and it was one of the distilleries around, between the 1910s and the 1940s. Distilleries were closing and opening all over the place, predominantly closing. So it closed in 1927, it reopened in 1938, again a couple of different owners, nothing particularly exciting to speak about. It just seemed to be owners that had it for sort of 5-10 years and then fell by the wayside, or lost money, or went into receivership, was bought out by somebody else, taken over by somebody else, until White Mackay, quite a big brand name, you probably would have heard of them, bought the distillery in 1973. Now, White Mackay themselves were bought by a very large company based in India called United Spirits in 2007. And prior to them taking it over in 2002, it used to be called Old Fettercairn, and it was Old Fettercairn 10-year-old. And I'm sure my dad has a bottle of it somewhere. It's probably worth a fair bit, because in 2002 it then changed to this, which was Fettercairn 1824 being the date that it was open. And it changed to a 12-year-old. So this was the standard bottling for Fettercairn. United Spirits came in, took it over in 2007, and then it was kind of struggling. It wasn't a particularly highly regarded distillery. This, I'll be honest, wasn't a particularly highly regarded malt whisky. One of my good friends who works in the whisky industry, I know him quite well, slates this. This is one of the worst whiskies that he's ever had. And when I was going through, when I told him that I was doing this challenge and trying to find certain things, and I was trying to find one from every distillery, he was like, "Oh, well, I hope you don't get that bloody 1824. Mr. X, thank you for this, because to be honest, I'd rather try this, because I want to know if it is as bad as he says it is, rather than the new version," which was released in 2010. So I know that this is at least 6-7-year-old miniature, which is fine. The fill level is really good. I'm confident that this is going to be as it was put in the bottle. But they changed it in 2010 to this, which is called the Fior, which apparently is Gaelic for true, so it says. So this is now what you can find, and you're looking at about 40 quid for this. It's about 40 quid a Master of Malt. This is a non-aged statement, apparently around 10-year-old, and there is some peated malt in there, which wasn't necessary in the first. What White Mackay have done, or what United Spirits have done through White Mackay, is with Fettercairn, they've gone more premium. So they're now not going for this, which I'll be honest, it's not that it looks cheap, but it looks like it's not a particularly exciting label. It looks like a fairly standard bottle of single malt whiskey. It almost looks like an own label from a supermarket or a tourist shop or something like that. It's not particularly exciting. The feel is premium. The price has gone up a bit. You know, this is a 12-year-old, and you'd probably pay about 30 quid for this originally. And what they've now done, which is getting a bit of stick in the whiskey press and community, is a lot of distilleries now are doing no age statements, but the price is going up. Now their argument is that they're not putting an age statement on it, but they are using older whiskies as well as younger whiskies. What a lot of people are thinking and feeling is that you've got younger whiskies in because it's cheaper to do. You say you can put some older whiskies in, and there might be, but in a 70cl bottle, it might be the equivalent of 1cl is a 20-year-old, and the rest of it is a 6-year-old, but you've charged 50 quid, whereas the 10-year-old that you used to sell, you were selling for 35, 40. So, you know, you're sort of taking the piss a bit. And it's this transparency thing as well. It's why a lot of people kick off about E150 colouring, caramel, whatever you want to call it, in whiskey, to give it consistency. It's about what was the other thing as well? Yeah, non-age statements. It's about all these certain things that, you know, we're not going to give you with the full information. We're not going to give you blended malts and blended whiskies in terms of what the makeup is, in terms, you know, what are they made of and what's the percentages. In a no-age statement, you know, you've got no idea of how old the whiskies are that they're using and what quantity. It could be 99% 5-year-old whiskey, and it could be 1% 30-year-old whiskey, or it could be the other way around. You just never know. So, I digress again. So that's where we are now. So that's their standard bottling, is the Fior. But I got this off Mr. X. I'm intrigued to try it, so this is what I'm going to take as a representation of Fettercairn. It might not be a fair representation of Fettercairn. I might be doing them a disservice. But we go with what we've got. So this is 12-year-old. It is 40%. I've no idea what it's matured in. I've been struggling to find out generally sort of what various Scotch whiskies matured in. If anybody's got any idea of any sort of websites out there, because I did find a couple of cracking websites when I was doing my American whiskies, bourbonr.com, and a couple of other places were really, really good for. This was like, it's all new casks in American, or particularly bourbon. It's brand new casks and it's American owned. But it was really, really good to be able to see what the makeup of each whiskey was in terms of the percentage of corn and rye and barley and everything like that. If there was an equivalent of what casks are being used in the Scotch malt whiskies, because I know it's barley, I know the makeup of it, but it'd be really interesting to know what cask they're matured in. If there is any list anywhere, because I've been finding it quite difficult to find out exactly per distillery. So if anybody's got any good places for me to go when I'm doing my research, please do let me know in the comments. So, Fettercairn N224. Ollie, this one's for you, mate. Right, okay. So, this is quite weird on the nose. It's slightly oily. It's slightly grassy. But it's almost like wet hay that's going a little bit foisty. It's slightly barnyardy and slightly vegetal. And there's a weird sickly sweetness to it, and I'm wondering, I mean, it's not hugely dark, but I'm wondering whether they have added some colouring into it, some E150 caramel colouring, which can give you a slightly artificial sweetness if there is a fair amount that's put in. This is a weird nose. It's a real weird farmy vegetal slightly off nose. It sort of carries on the palate as well. It's weirdly balanced. It starts off all right. It starts off quite rich on the mouthfeel, and quite, it's rich and it's smooth, and there's not an awful lot. And then as it sits for about a second, all of a sudden this weird farmyardy character that you had on the nose kicks in on the palate. And it's quite a cloying sweetness as well. Now, to be honest, I can still taste it now. So in terms of a finish, it's decent for its length. But it's a sort of very caramelised apple pie that has been cooked, put in the fridge, and then you pull it out and you're eating it cold. But it's been in the fridge slightly too long. Cold pizza and cold pie and stuff out of the fridge the morning after is normally absolutely fantastic, but this is very much like a tarte tatin or an apple pie with some caramelised crumble on top that's been cooked. An apple pie really should be eaten hot with ice cream, but this has been cooked and then left, kind of forgotten about outside. So before it's gone in the fridge, it's been left on the kitchen counter almost overnight, and it's like you've come down and gone, oh shit, I forgot about that, I'll go and put it in the fridge and see if that'll last a bit longer. So it's gone a bit hard and it's gone a bit chewy, and then you've eaten it cold, so all the caramelised sweetness has gone a little bit cloying. It's really quite appley. It's like apple and caramel, but it's not a pleasant apple and caramel. And there's a little bit of a spiritiness at the back, and there's an oakiness to it right on the finish, just as you swallow. There's an oakiness to it which doesn't work, it doesn't fit, it kind of like jumps in at the last minute and just smacks you around the chops with wood, just wood, generic wood, chewing on the end of a pencil, that type of wood, and then disappears again, and it's a bit like, ooh, that didn't really work, where did that come from? It's really not particularly well balanced. I really hope the Fior's a lot better than this, and that's probably the reason that they've done it, because if this is what the 1824, and I'm pretty confident this is what the 1824 tasted like, because the fill level was absolutely fine on this. I'm not surprised it didn't sell particularly well and they had to change it, because this is not a great whiskey. Now, I say caramel apple pie and tarte tatin, and you'd think, actually that sounds really nice. And it would be if it wasn't for the fact that this is so unbalanced, slightly out of kilter. It's, like I say, it's apple pie almost that's gone slightly off. The nose has this really weird, spirity, wet hay, farmyard, barnyard vibe going onto it. None of it works. It's really dissonant flavours that they're not balanced, they're not marrying, and they're not even flavours that individually, if they were married, would actually make it any better. Not a great whiskey. Not a great whiskey. I'd be fascinated to see what Fior's like. I really would. I'd love to know what Fior's like. And if anybody's had it and wants to put any comments in to say, actually, Fior's are really good. It might be awful, and it might be a case of, they've not improved it. But they'd have to go some to go as bad or worse than this. But if you've had Fior and you can give me some idea of what it tastes like, please do put some comments down of it, because it'd be great to know. I really hope it's a lot better. The packaging is absolutely gorgeous. I think it's a really, really nice bottle, and I hope it's one where it's not style over content. But that's not a great whiskey at all. It's not even a good one. that flavour is going to stay with me for a bit as well. I'm really going to have a large glass of water to get rid of that flavour. Interesting. Mr. X, thank you very, very much for that. I'm very glad I've tried it, because I kept getting told that it's really not a good whiskey, and I'm glad that I've tried it now to go, actually, yeah, it's not really, and I really wanted to give it a chance. But yes, I think Fior is going on my list of post-challenge, try and find it if you can to see what it's like, because I'm hoping that they've turned it around and they've done a good job with it. Right, let's start the weekend. That's that done. I'm going to get some fly spray, blast the shit out of these bastard things. I'll see you at the next one. Cheers.